Спасибо большое, что пришли на мою презентацию. Я поговорю с вами о дешифровке файлов и взломе паролей. Просто напомню, что это такое. Потом мы пока покажем наш софт. Проблема с...
And at the end of this session, I will answer some questions. So, as you may all know, when you want to log to a system, you have to enter your password. Then this password value is hashed with a one-way hash function. This result is compared to a file, for example, etc shadow in the case of Linux. If the two value match, then you have access to your system, otherwise you are rejected. Password cracking is just the art of getting the password value only from the hash. So the attacker just has the hash file, the file which contains the hash, and want to get the password value from it. The main simple approach for that is called brute force. So first you get the file, then for each possible password value you compute the hash of this value until you find a match in the file. This approach is quite simple. You can iterate over the password value, so you just need computational power. You don't need any memory, and it's the most basic approach for password cracking. Another common approach is called pre-computed dictionary attack. It's also simple. You create a database once of password and the corresponding hash of this password, and then for a given password hash, you just have to look up to this table and see if the password is inside. If yes, you just output the password value. So it can be seen as the opposite of the brute force approach, because in this case, as soon as you have created this database, you only need one database lookup to get the password, so you need a lot of memory to store the database, but you don't need any computational power. Then there is a trade-off between brute force and pre-computed dictionary attack. It's called rainbow table attack. So I won't enter into the detail for this attack, but the main idea is you store the first and the last column of this table, and then with hash and reduction function computation, you can crack a password. So you can really do a trade-off between computation and memory storage. It's really a trade-off between the two previous attacks. So one common and well-known countermeasure is called salting. The idea is just to hash a salt concatenated with a password instead of only hashing the password. And then the salt is a public value, and it's stored in the hash. It's a public value. So then if you generate randomly your salt, it makes dictionary and rainbow table much more difficult, but it doesn't change anything to brute force, because again, you just iterate over the password value. You know the salt because it's public. So as you may know, salt is now implemented in most modern systems. For example, Linux uses a randomly generated salt with 5,000 iteration of SHA-512 as a hash function. So password cracking is a problem which has been well studied. There exist several optimized tools like John the Ripper or Hashcat. There is a password hashing competition happening those days to select new algorithm with more desirable property. And also you've maybe seen the hash runner contest during PH days last week, which was also a password cracking contest. Now something a bit different, Ecryptfs. So Ecryptfs is a file encryption software. It's included in the Linux kernel, and it's used by default for home folder encryption in Ubuntu. Meaning that when you install your system, if you check this encrypt my home folder checkbox, you will use Ecryptfs to encrypt your home folder. To do that, a passphrase is randomly generated, and this passphrase will be used for file encryption and decryption with AES by default. This passphrase must be encrypted and stored on the hard disk. It is done in the wrap passphrase file. And in Ecryptfs, the process of passphrase encryption is called key wrapping. So to wrap a key, it's quite simple. You input a salt on the password. You hash it 65,536 times with SHA-512. The 16th byte of the result will be the wrapping key. Then you hash the intermediate result one more time, and you obtain a signature. This signature will be stored in the wrap passphrase file at the beginning of the file. Then you use the generated wrapping key to encrypt the passphrase with AES, and you store the wrap passphrase in the same file. So if you read your wrap passphrase file, you will see at the beginning the signature in green, and then the wrap passphrase in red. To unwrap the key and then use it for file decryption, it's quite similar. You input a salt and a password. You hash it 65,536 times. You output the wrapping key. You hash the intermediate result one more time, and you obtain a signature. Then you compare the signature with the signature stored in the file. If there is a match, you know that you have generated the correct wrapping key. So as I showed you before, Ecryptfs use a salt, which is a good thing. However, this salt is by default always the same if it is not if another value is not written in a config file in the home folder. And this default value will be 001122, etc. And it will be the same for all the installation of Ecryptfs. And if you want to use Ecryptfs for the whole home folder encryption, you must use the default salt value because you cannot create your config file in your home folder because it will be encrypted. And in addition, in Ubuntu, the wrapping password is directly the user password for simplicity. So that the user just log in once, his password is used for login, and then it's used for file decryption. Meaning that with the default salt behavior, dictionary and rainbow table attack are possible against the user password directly from the key signature. So that's what we did. And during our research, we noticed that Ecryptfs signature cracking was already been implemented in the Jumbo version. So you just have to tell John the Ripper that it's Ecryptfs signature. Then you have the default salt value and then the key signature. More simple, there is even a Python script which helps you to extract this key signature from the wrap passphrase file directly to the John the Ripper format. So it was quite easy. We ran this software on the famous RAW file, which contains 40 million common passwords with the default salt value. So it took us 1 month on the standard computer, but we made this dictionary available on our GitHub, so now it can be used for to reverse a hash instantly. You just need to get this dictionary. So the default salt problem has already been noticed in a previous bug, which was opened last year and not solved. But from our finding about Ubuntu, a new CVE has been opened, and it has been quickly corrected by the Ecryptfs developer. Oh, sorry. What they did is that they created a new file version, which starts with 3.0.2. And in the new version, the salt is randomly generated with, from the urandom source. And the salt is by default stored in the wrap passphrase file. And as soon as you have updated your system, if you log off and log in again, then your file will be automatically converted because the passphrase won't change, just the file format which will change. So with the correction, the hashing speed is less, the signature is less attractive for password cracking because you need to crack 65,000 iteration of SHA-512 compared to the 5,000 iteration for a standard Linux login system. But by the way, we update the John the Ripper Python script for future research to crack this new file format. So to check that your system has been updated, you again open the wrap passphrase file, and you can see that it starts with 3.0.2. Then you have the randomly generated salt, and then again the signature and the passphrase. So to sum up, we've seen that as soon as the password is used for something else that login, even the hash version of the passphrase, it increases the attack surface. So we need to be really careful when we use such feature. And in the future, we would be interested to see if a new key derivation function like the standard PBKDF2 or other incoming PhD candidates could be more interesting for this situation. Thank you for your attention, and if you have any question, I would be pleased to answer. Thank you. No question?
No question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.